Is the whiskey bubble bursting? With reports of distilleries going bankrupt, fan favourite bottles shooting up in price, and auction sales dropping off, there's been talks that we're heading towards another Whisky Loch. So if you're watching this video, I can only assume you like whiskey, or you're one of the family members I've bullied into watching this.
That's me, I'm on TV.
Either way, I've been on a deep whiskey dive for the last 5 years and a casual fan for at least 10, so I've been in the thick of a real exciting time for whiskey all around the world. But is this golden period coming to an end?
Don't say that. What? That? What?
Grab a dram and join me, Jeff Whiskey, that whiskey reviewer in the shirt and shades, where we chat and slap all things whiskey. If this sounds good, slap subscribe, but for now, let's crack on. Jeff Whiskey. This is almost a topical video. I've been planning a whiskey pricing video for a while, and with the announcement of quite a well-known distillery going bankrupt, I decided to merge it into one. You all know I'm not an expert, and my channel certainly leans more into entertainment than educational. Calling it entertainment is a stretch, but I thought this was a great meaty topic where I can give my onions and my experience on the current state of whiskey. I have tried to scrape and cross-reference any facts here, but if anything needs updating or correcting, let me know.
No, you got it all wrong.
I think it's fair to say Scotch has always been pretty massive and has been skyrocketing of late, with lots of new distilleries opening up. Big names like Ardnamurchan, Ardnahoe, Glasgow Distillery are all still relatively youthful in the grand scheme of Scotch. And I think there's 7 new Scotch distilleries opening this year alone. Not to mention the massive market in world whiskey, the Japanese whiskey boom in the distant past, and even where I'm based in England, there are over 35 distilleries since St George's Distillery opened. Was it 2006 it was founded? So with all these new distilleries opening, old brands being revived, and the huge, slightly shady push of whiskey investment, it can feel a bit like overstuffing a sausage.
Nope, that sounds wrong.
Or me in some of these shirts. But with this great growth, there's started to be some hiccups appearing, or ones that have been obvious enough for me to notice. I think the first one on my radar was the Lakes Distillery in England, a more luxury brand with a focus on special releases. It had quite a large following. They had a lot of crowdfunding and local and private investment. However, I think it was last year where they had quite a big wobble. They were reporting operating losses of 2.2 million, tied in with the whiskey maker Davil Gandhi leaving. It was looking like a slightly shaky future. They since have another ex-Macallan taking over that role, and in June this year the distillery was sold to winemaker Nye Timber, who have a 10-year plan for the distillery. So it does all sound more promising now. You then have Penderyn, who saw huge growth for the Welsh brand, and they recently paused production at one of their sites only a year after opening, blaming a slowdown in the economy affecting the demand of premium products. The company do still sound hopeful, with the Swansea site remaining open, though in contrast, Mackmyra Distillery has just announced that they have filed for bankruptcy, with their board of directors stating that it's not possible to continue the company's operations. The Swedish distillery seemed to be a bit of a powerhouse when I was a wide-eyed enthusiast at the start of my journey.
How new and exciting this must all be for you.
There's lots of innovation and exploration. They've got a unique USP with their Gravity Distillery, where their liquid was produced from the top down, and they have casks that are aged inside a mine. There was also lots of cask share and investment plans which appealed to independent bottlers who put out some great stuff, like the No Nonsense whiskey release, which in my books beat any core range bottle from them out of the water by far. Vin, you can pay me later. They had a really good presence on social media. They got the word of mouth out with near free online tastings and seemed to be doing all the right things. Sadly, things took a turn. They went quiet, at least here in the UK, and it felt like lots of people were just starting to see their slightly saturation of non-aged releases just hanging around on shelves. Some reports show that they've not actually been profitable since 2010, and it is now where the plug has been pulled. From worldwide inflation to running costs, there could be a huge number of factors why this has had to happen, so fingers crossed this is actually a positive step to get things back on track for them. While I am praising the distillery and saying that it is a shame, I am also part of the problem because I've never brought a full-size bottle of Mackmyra. As overall, apart from some standout exceptions, the liquid's not necessarily connected with me, and I wonder if there are many other people in the same boat. I think there could be more distilleries in a similar position, especially the newer, less established brands who are only now seeing return on the aging liquid. I'm not a businessman, but I know to have a distillery must be a nightmare with the first 3 years of maturing stock before you can even sell any whiskey of your own. I think lots of distilleries had the right idea with selling gin, and distilleries like 8 Doors releasing other people's blended products and making that transparent that's what they're doing. But the next little topic on this speedy ramble run is the whiskey price jump. So it is now quite famous that Diageo has increased the prices quite dramatically on a lot of their bottles. While increases are to be expected over time, it can leave a bitter taste in the mouth of us buyers. At least it's good to know that it's not just us whiskey folk, they've also increased the prices of pints for the third time in just over a year.
I trade both my ears for a pint right about now.
Taking some numbers from Malt, who have done the maths for me, these fan favourites have now, for a lot of folk, been priced out of our league. You've got the absolute shelf staple Lagavulin 16, increased by 42%, though it is now pretty much on offer everywhere at a similar price it once was. It just doesn't seem to be selling. Oban 14 has had a huge 92% increase, and possibly the most painful is the Talisker 18-year-old, which jumped up nearly 200% in price. I have had this bottle of smoky, peppery Ribena near the top of my wish list for so long, only to now kick myself that I never grabbed a bottle. There's still plenty of bottles around with its new look, but they're not in my price range. It is not just Diageo, there have been increases across the board in the whiskey world, with some certainly feeling a little less fair than others. So with more bottles sitting on shelves, even with the increased prices providing a bit of extra profit, is certainly adding to the bottleneck of too many bottles sitting around. Though of course I can't talk about price without mentioning the secondary market, especially auctions. The last few years have certainly seen certain folk and a few bots wiping the shelves off certain well-loved bottles and then flipping them for a hefty profit. From watches to diamonds, this is pretty much common practice in every industry.
These are extremely rare. Pay no attention to that.
And while this doesn't really cause that much damage to the distillery's profit, it does affect the reputation and how the viewer? Time for a dram break. And how the buyer views the product. I've been avoiding auctions as I feel like it could be a slippery slope for me, and yet it still leaves me with a slight bad taste about the whiskey world. It is important to remember the positive now is that more bottles are hanging around longer on shelves. I genuinely saw an available bottle of Springbank online a few weeks back.
It's very rare to see real magic.
Also, more bottles are being resold for under RRP on auction sites, which must be a right kick for the flippers. But taking a step back and looking at it as a whole, is this quite a negative sign of the times? Is this all just a case of too much whiskey and not enough demand? I have been seeing pop up more and more, especially on social media, about the return of the Whisky Lock. No, not that handsome man, but to the 1980s where the whiskey industry faced a surplus of unsold whiskey due to overproduction, and it caused many distilleries to halt production. Some were temporary, while others sadly never returned, with their whiskey locked away while they waited for the demand to catch up. The industry overall struggled for years, with distilleries shut down, some permanently while others kind of merged, rebranded to survive. So does the whiskey world today compare to the Whisky Lock of the 1980s? In some ways it could be possible that history is repeating itself, stockpiles of unsold whiskey, bottles being too expensive for the masses, and distilleries having to scale back. So while this all sounds strangely bleak for a channel where slapping bottles is the main highlight, there's my quota. There is a big but coming. So while some distilleries and brands are struggling, whiskey is so much more global than it ever was. Markets are growing worldwide, with cult following for certain brands building half a world away from the distillery itself. Not to mention, whiskey is much more online than it ever has been.
This, Jen, is the internet.
Whiskey communities can shine light on smaller brands that they connect with, which hopefully will help ensure the brands that are doing things right survive. Whiskey is also much more versatile in style. Following the only quite recent boom of single malts, unique spirit is celebrated instead of being funneled in generic blends, which hopefully means there's a bottle that suits everyone. You can already see the whiskey industry is changing and adapting and targeting new markets. It probably ties in why lots of brands are currently having a new look, stepping away from heritage styles, but don't get me started on branding. I keep threatening that I'm going to do a big branding video, but I fear that could be hours long. It just looks like us whiskey lovers are in for the ride, which will continue no matter what path the industry goes down. Who knows, it may lead to some amazing bargains to be had. But what are your thoughts on the current state of the whiskey market? Will we see a repeat of the Whisky Loch, or will the industry just bounce back stronger? Let me know down in the comments. Sure, many of you know a lot more than I do about this. I'm aware that this is a little more like of a deep dive than my normal, irrelevant, innuendo-filled reviews, so do give me your thoughts and feedback. Hopefully I can still get this edited time to be relevant. Good luck, future Jeff. A huge thank you to my channel members who support me making whiskey content for you. I'm grateful to have you all here, and all that's left to say is cheers to the next one.